Welcome to the Auto Repair Focus podcast. In this episode, we're continuing our discussion about the future of the MOT. If you've missed part 1 and you're watching this on YouTube, then check out the Auto Repair Focus channel and find the podcast playlist. If you're listening to this podcast, then find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Amazon Music. Check out the episode list for part 1. And while on both platforms, why not like and subscribe to make sure you don't miss out on further episodes. In this part, I'm talking to Mark Field, Chief Executive of the IAAF. And we're going to be talking about the MOT consultation and what it really means for the future of the MOT. Should new technologies be integrated? And how can technicians help consumers understand the importance of the MOT and what support should they be getting from the industry? Mark, thank you very much for joining me.
No problem at all. Good to be here.
So the first question really is, how relieved are you that the MOT is staying at 311?
I think it's great news for the industry, great news for motorists. The MOT is something that affects every part of the automotive supply chain, and I think when I found the news, I was relieved, and I think we've had some really good wins on block exemption. Some of the IAAF lobbying work has been really positive. Nothing unites the industry more. Nothing unites us fellow trade associations more than when they talk about tinkering with the MOT. And I think that it kind of galvanises our industry and brings us a bit closer together. So I am relieved. I'm a little concerned about where we continue to head with this, because again, this is 2 or 3 times now in what I would say a very short space of time. So 2 or 3 consultancy or consultants or consultations, on this MOT test frequency. And I think, I don't want this to be a hollow victory. I think we need to make sure that we continue to push for, the most stringent of roadworthiness testing.
I was going to ask you if the MOT really is safe. You brought the point up there. I think I've lost count a number of times I've reported on challenges to the MOT, whether it's been a throwaway comment by an MP or it's been a consultation that's taken time to go through. It always seems it's almost every 2 to 3 years we're asking that question again, whether we move to 322, 411. If the MOT is really sort of worth it. So it seems to have been a really strong consultation. I think it's taken a year to release the results. So does this really sort of boost the MOT and sort of always prepare us really for the next time this conversation inevitably comes up?
Yeah, I think it was a big consultation. There was a lot of effort that went in, and in my 20 plus years in the trade, I think it went probably as far as I thought it was going to go, or has ever gone, in terms of we could be in for a change here. Now, in answer to your question about whether the MOT is really safe, I remember a garage talking to me when he was doing his sort of MOT testing, and the trainer said, "Listen, where do you rank the MOT test in terms of a safety standard? Is it there? Is it there? Is it further down?" In effect, it's further down. The inspection is sort of almost the minimal safety standards. But I kind of reframe it a little bit and think, do we need a bit more of a better appreciation? And I don't just mean us as a trade, the consumer. Do we support the exchange of the garage or MOT tester and the consumer? Do they really understand why they're bringing that vehicle in, why it's important? And that's probably a reliance on or a task or responsibility for government and probably us trade associations that we support, like we do with right to repair or with block exemption, that actually when it comes to the MOT, you are here because of a very valid reason. And I think that MOT testers need to be supported in that approach, because that way we will look at, well, it'll benefit everybody in terms of our upskilling, but also in terms of what we actually charge, and charge correctly for an MOT test. But yeah, I kind of reframe it in terms of, I think the dialogue needs to be a bit more a bit more robust, a bit more informative in terms of saying, well, actually, the MOT is very important, and this is why. And I think that, and again, we're talking big numbers here in terms of consumers, but you don't want, and what's been found out from this consultation is that consumers do see a value in having a very, a safe vehicle on the road, a roadworthy vehicle on the road. So I think it's important that we sort of build on that. I don't want us to wait around. Whilst the data hasn't necessarily changed in terms of when you looked at the last test or last consultation compared to this consultation, and certainly when you look at the futuristic or upcoming vehicle park in terms of EVs, the failure rate was obviously up there on tyres and suspension. I just think there is an opportunity for us to support MOT testers, support garages, and saying, right, okay, this is why it's important to have your MOT, rather than this is now a distraction from what I'm doing in my daily working week or daily life, and actually going, I've got to, it's really important. And for whatever reason, I think we've, not we as in IAAF, but we as in maybe the government as well, we've probably downplayed its importance. Hence why we have these consultations every few years. And I think the motor industry has done very well at putting it at the top of the agenda. So as I said, it really does bring everyone together in terms of, it's a bit like, tinker with the housing market at your peril, and to kind of tinker with the MOT at your peril, to be fair, because we can put forward some very, very compelling arguments because we live it every day. So yeah, that's my thought really, I think, on that one, in terms of we need to not wait for the next consultation. We need to be on the front foot with all of this.
That's it. Yeah, there was, as you said, there was a lot of data in the paper, and it was good to see the amount of drivers who were prepared, to fight as well for the 311. But we always see these surveys come out as well. There might be very low pull rates of, especially during the cost of living, about drivers skipping MOTs or missing MOTs. And I think I completely agree with you. I think more can be done to support technicians who are doing this, and to support the drivers who don't realise just how important that MOT is. But also just to understand, because I still think there's a lot of drivers out there who feel like the MOT is the safety check, is the one that they need, is the one that they, it's that's all they need to do. Take it to the garage every year, get the certificate, take it home. And I'm seeing cars driving around with, lights missing and dodgy tires, and you just think, how did that pass an MOT? And it could be the case that it's been 10 months and it's just not been checked. So I definitely agree, and I think we need, there needs to be more support between technician and driver, and I think technicians to get the support as well, because they're the ones who are ultimately saying this vehicle is safe,
Yeah,
and what it is.
I think we've, some of the work at IAAF has been looking at where we add value into the garage market, which is a relatively new area for us. Obviously, all of our content, all of our information benefits the entire supply chain, but certainly a bit of engagement at garage level. When you look at what we're trying to do with garages and supporting them, it is that communication. It is actually saying to them that this is, and this is the same for new drivers. My son's a new driver. How aware is he of the importance of his MOT? How aware is he, as I can tell him because I'm in the trade and we can talk about it. But I think it's what we're doing to really bolster that communication, because, like you said, people look at it and think, well, there was a lot of work the IAAF did with Northern Ireland, which is different in terms of the MOT check, because what was happening is that they obviously have these government-run MOT test stations. The problem that we had was that motorists were using the MOT as a diagnostic check. So they were using it, the failure rate was really high. They were getting the problems and they were going off and fixing them without adhering to sort of regular service levels. So I think it does feed into the narrative of um, vehicle maintenance, vehicle service, vehicle repair, all of that. It is part of it, and again, we have to appreciate that the garage is at the front end of this. They are delivering this message to a motorist, and we've got to support them on that because yes, vehicle repair bills can be they can fluctuate depending on the job required, but we've got to support that relationship in terms of making it a lot better because garages are obviously having to deal with the brunt of you know some of this backlash that can come from this, and that's kind of where the consultation came about, I guess, in terms of it's a cost of living crisis. Let's see if we can save people money. Now, obviously, that was kind of blown out of the water as an argument because these worsening problems they're not going to fix themselves. They're going to cost more in the longer run, and it's dangerous as well in that. So. I think it could be. I think the test could be stricter. I think it's become much more intense and much more labour intensive for garages. And I think that we have a number of garages who are, charging full price and don't get involved in discounting. And that's a individual business decision really based on what they feel they're able to charge. But yeah, it's a big task for me this year is to see how we can look at supporting garages a lot more in terms of that communication with motorists.
Because cars are becoming more technical, less mechanical. The older sort of cars, you kind of, if something broke, if something went wrong, you can almost feel it. But
Hmm.
today there seems to be a reliance on the engine light coming on to sort of highlight a malfunction or a problem or a system. And I do wonder if drivers are actually connecting with their cars less today because they just get in and drive rather than having to think about the carburetors clogging up and the fuel lines and the fuel treatments and so on and so forth. So to understand an MOT failure is a bit more difficult today than it may have been
Yeah.
20, 30 years ago.
We've kind of you've got this kind of throwaway culture, I guess, and the car is the last sort of stand in terms of actually if it breaks we repair it, which is really important for our industry. But I think it's that understanding. I mean, the wear and tear items are still pretty much the same in terms of their failure rates, but I think again, it just goes into this understanding of yes, you're being governed by the vehicle now. It tells you when it needs a service. It tells you when this is done. This, So I think it's an interesting point that consumers naturally become detached from something, and there is a body of work that says that in the pandemic when there was the extension, and what you're seeing now in terms of the trends is that obviously there is a peak now, which used to be March, April, May, is now September, October, November. That's kind of leveling out a bit. And is that more to do with people reverting back to their habits, their servicing intervals, or just because they've going back to when they used to have their MOT done at that various point, new cars, blah blah, and moving into the 3 year old area. But there is a bit of a leveling out. The peaks are never as high and the drops are never as low in these trends. But certainly, work from myself and Peter from the SMMT, we were looking at the fact that there is a move back to away from that 6 months exemption that put them into the Q4 and moved it more into the summer. But yeah, it all comes back to communication, doesn't it, Phil? Really, in terms
Mm.
of how do we, I see it firsthand because I've got a new driver in the family, and if something goes wrong, he's going to call me.
Mm.
But I can't solve every problem, and it's certainly not mechanically, but it's kind of like, right, how do you keep them involved in something and as um, uh, attached to their vehicle, which,
Mm.
like I said, driving was a privilege, and having a motor vehicle is a privilege. My dad told me that, so I think it's something that, again, as part of this reframing, as part of this communication, there's a little bit more of an appreciation about the about mobility. So yeah, there's lots of work to do, and it does lend us into work that we're doing with Right to Repair, which is um, not necessarily going into the intricacies of the freedoms or the rights that we've got regarding sort of block exemption specifically, but just opening up our trade. I always talk about coming out of the shadows at our conference, and I don't think we can take a few knocks to the motor trade. We can be told that we're you know not the industry to go into and things like that. And I hold a completely different view. I'm a really big fan of this industry in terms of its entrepreneurship, in terms of what it can do for small businesses and the careers that it can offer. It's very varied. So part of that Right to Repair is to try and open up and say, almost similar to what they do with small business Saturday and things like that, that actually, the independent aftermarket looks after 76% of the 34 million vehicles on UK roads. We must be doing something right. We are a good, strong industry. So that's where we need to position ourselves. So a lot of work ahead.
I was going to say, because is this with the MOT consultation now behind us for now? Is that just one tick on the long list? Because we're facing, we talk about skill shortage, we talk about the cost of living crisis, and garages, having to pay more for energy, and wages, and so on and so forth. Connected cars, they're coming down the line, which can recommend a franchise dealer over an independent service. Access to data, that's always been a fight. There's so much on the plate at the moment. So is it a case now we can look at momentum going forward and say, yes, we're on the right track. There's a lot coming for us, but united we're stronger.
Yeah, I think the work we've done with UK APGAR, and us as an expanding trade association in IAAF has meant that we've had some wins. With block exemption, we've had some really good, clearer definitions, which have really shored up our clarification of the legislation. MOT equally, that is a big win for the trade. I think it's always a challenge. I think when you look at digital, and digital sort of acts that are coming in place, then it's amazing how certain things can automatically just have a toe in the automotive industry. And whilst digital affects everything, there is, we've always got to be mindful of things that can have a sort of like spider's web out to the automotive sector, which probably were never the case before. So we've got, I think the key thing for us is where we engage with the government, because one of the things that we seek is legislation, legislative protection on these things, because I think it's really important that we have that. And one of the key things of that, particularly when we move into block exemption, is that we have evidence of non-compliance, evidence of where things aren't working, where they should be working. So we get garages feeding into us probably a daily basis at the moment. Digital service records is a classic one that we get, where the vehicle manufacturer says an independent is not allowed to touch them. It's not true. It's not covered in block exemption. It's actually type approval, but you can. An independent garage can. There's admin fees or various different things. But myself and Neil, particularly Neil, working really hard in terms of answering these. So, whilst it's your question was. It's never a challenge completed. It's more like a challenge that's created another list of challenges. But we are we are positive, and I think that it is part of us raising the profile of this entire industry, and making sure that when it comes to future mobility, the automotive or the independent automotive aftermarket has a say, and because we are such an important player.
Mark, that's everything. Thank you very much for your thoughts.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
And thank you as well for watching. Don't forget you can find the Auto Repair Focus podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Amazon Music. You can also watch along on the YouTube channel. Search for Auto Repair Focus. But please like and subscribe to those channels. It's absolutely free, and you'll make sure that you're always notified when a new episode drops, a new multimedia feature is launched, or more content becomes available. Why wouldn't you do it? See you next time.